They said it was too smart, too clean, too well thought out. The kind of move that makes people squint and lean back and ask, okay, but what's the catch? Funny thing is, the moment you do something genuinely clever, the room changes. Smiles tighten. Compliments sound like interrogations. Because average is comfortable, predictable is safe, but brilliance makes people nervous. When you think differently, when you act boldly, when you refuse to play dumb just to make others feel smart, suddenly your success feels illegal. And that's the joke, isn't it? The world doesn't panic when you fail. It panics when you win in a way it can't explain. Being clever has a strange side effect. It makes people nervous. Not inspired, not curious, nervous. The moment you do something smart that doesn't follow the usual script, the room shifts. Eyes narrow just a little. Compliments come wrapped in questions, because cleverness exposes something uncomfortable, that most people are running on habits, not thought. When you solve a problem cleanly, efficiently, almost effortlessly, it doesn't look like skill to them. It looks like a trick, and tricks in their minds always hide a lie somewhere. So instead of asking how you did it, they ask why. Instead of applauding, they investigate. Cleverness threatens the comfort of predictability, and predictability is what keeps the crowd calm. People are fine with intelligence as long as it stays decorative. Awards on walls, degrees in frames, titles on business cards. But applied intelligence, that's dangerous. When cleverness actually changes outcomes, skips steps, bends expectations, people start feeling exposed. Because if what you did was genuinely smart, then what does that say about what they didn't do? Suspicion becomes a shield. It's easier to assume manipulation than to admit someone outthought you. Easier to whisper about shortcuts than to accept that effort and clarity beat noise and repetition. Cleverness doesn't break rules. It reveals how flimsy some of them always were. There's also the fear of loss of control. Systems depend on people behaving in expected ways. Clever people don't always do that. They ask questions no one rehearsed answers for. They see patterns others missed. They move diagonally, while everyone else marches straight ahead. That kind of intelligence doesn't ask for permission, and that's unsettling. So it gets labeled as suspicious. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unpredictable. When you can't predict someone, you can't control them. And when you can't control them, you start doubting their intentions. Suddenly your smart decision is framed as sneaky. Your preparation is called plotting. Your foresight is mistaken for an agenda. What makes this even funnier is how often suspicion comes from people who praise intelligence in theory, but punish it in reality. They say they want innovation, but only the kind that looks familiar. They admire clever thinkers, as long as those thinkers don't outshine them in the room. The moment your intelligence changes the power balance, it stops being impressive and starts being too much. That's when cleverness gets rebranded as arrogance, manipulation, or dishonesty. Not because those things are true, but because they're convenient explanations that protect fragile egos. And here's the part no one likes to admit: suspicion isn't about what you did. It's about what they felt when you did it. Insecurity doesn't announce itself politely. It disguises itself as concern, as doubt, as just asking questions. When someone can't match your thinking, they question your motives instead. When they can't reach your level of clarity, they muddy the water around you. Cleverness becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see reflected back. So when your intelligence gets treated like a crime scene, remember this: the problem was never that you were too clever. The problem was that your cleverness disrupted a comfortable illusion. It reminded people that effort can be inefficient, that noise can be empty, that smarter doesn't always look louder. And once that realization hits, suspicion feels safer than admiration, because admiration would require change. And change is terrifying when you've built your identity on doing things the way they've always been done. Success has a funny way of killing the mood. Not failure. Failure makes people comfortable. They know how to react to it. They nod, offer sympathy, maybe feel a little better about themselves. But success, real success, that's when the air gets tight. Conversations slow down. Jokes don't land the same. Because your win doesn't just celebrate you. It silently questions everyone else. And that's where the discomfort creeps in. When you succeed, especially without looking exhausted or broken by it, people start wondering what they missed, what they did wrong, or worse, what they've been pretending not to see. The world loves the idea of success as long as it stays distant. Stories, movies, quotes on walls, safe, polished versions of winning. But when success walks into the room wearing your face, it's different. Now it's personal. Now it's measurable. Now it's standing right next to them. And nothing rattles people more than proof that something is possible when they've convinced themselves it isn't. Your success pokes holes in their excuses. It highlights the gap between intention and action. So instead of clapping, they shift. Instead of celebrating, they compare. And comparison is where admiration quietly turns into resentment. There's also an unspoken rule nobody admits exists. You're allowed to succeed, just not too much, and definitely not too fast. Struggle is relatable. Grinding is respectable. But when you cross a certain line, when results start speaking louder than effort, people get uneasy. Because now they can't comfort themselves by saying, "They worked harder than me." Now they have to confront the possibility that you worked smarter, or differently, or simply refuse to follow the same tired patterns. That realization is uncomfortable, so they soften it by questioning your methods, instead of acknowledging your outcome. Success also rearranges power, and power shifts make people nervous. When you rise, dynamics change. Opinions that were once ignored suddenly carry weight. Doors open. Voices listen. And not everyone is happy to see that happen, especially if they benefited from you staying where you were. So your success becomes luck, or timing, or connections. Anything to make it feel temporary, explainable, or undeserved. Because if your success is earned and repeatable, then it's permanent, and permanence is threatening. What really unsettles people is confidence that comes from winning. Not loud confidence, not bragging, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need validation. That kind of confidence is terrifying because it can't be shaken easily. You don't argue as much. You don't explain yourself to everyone. You don't panic at criticism. And that calm drives people crazy. They want you defensive. They want you insecure. Because insecurity is manageable. Confidence backed by results feels like standing next to a loaded weapon that never gets fired, but never needs to be. And here's the twist, most of the discomfort isn't hatred. It's fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being exposed. Fear of realizing that comfort was chosen over growth. Your success forces a question. They don't want to answer. If you could do it, why didn't they? So instead of asking that question inward, they project it outward. They scrutinize you. They downplay your achievements. They wait for you to slip. Because if you fall, the discomfort goes away. The world feels balanced again. Order is restored. Until then, your success sits there, smiling quietly, making people shift in their seats, reminding them that winning isn't loud or messy or dramatic. It's precise, intentional, and deeply unsettling to anyone who built their peace on staying exactly where they are. There's an unspoken agreement most people live by, even if they've never signed it. Don't think too far ahead. Don't question the pattern. Don't disrupt the flow. Just play your part, follow the rhythm, and everything stays predictable. The moment you start playing smart, you tear that agreement in half. You stop doing things just because they've always been done that way. You stop wasting energy to look busy. You stop pretending confusion is normal. And that's when the tension starts. Because intelligence doesn't just solve problems. It exposes how many of them were artificial to begin with. Unspoken rules exist to keep order, not truth. They reward repetition, not originality. They protect comfort, not progress. When you break those rules by thinking clearly, you don't look rebellious. You look dangerous. Not because you're loud or aggressive, but because you can't be managed easily. You don't fit neatly into expectations. You ask why instead of when. You look for leverage instead of approval. That kind of thinking feels like sabotage to people who rely on routines to feel important. What really rattles people is that smart play often looks simple. Too simple, no drama, no visible struggle. You bypass the long way around and arrive early, and everyone else is still halfway through the maze, sweating and proud of it. They've been taught that difficulty equals value. So when you succeed without suffering, it feels like cheating. Playing smart breaks the illusion that pain is necessary. It reveals that much of what's celebrated as hard work is just poorly designed effort. There's also a hierarchy built on compliance. The ones who follow rules without question rise slowly but safely. The ones who obey tradition get rewarded with approval. But when you play smart, you don't always ask for permission. You observe, calculate, and move. That short circuits the hierarchy. Suddenly someone without the loudest voice or longest tenure has influence. And influence gained without the usual rituals is unsettling. It makes people feel like the game they mastered isn't the only game in town. Playing smart also removes excuses from the environment. When you choose efficiency, clarity, and strategy, it highlights how much time others spend avoiding decisions. You don't attend every meeting. You don't chase every argument. You don't react to every provocation. That restraint looks suspicious in a world addicted to noise. People expect chaos. They expect urgency. Calm focus feels wrong to them, like silence in a room where everyone's used to shouting. And then there's the emotional part nobody admits out loud. Playing smart often means refusing to perform struggle for sympathy. You don't complain as much. You don't broadcast every obstacle. You don't wear burnout like a badge of honor. That absence of visible suffering makes people uncomfortable because struggle is a shared language. When you don't speak it, you sound foreign. Instead of asking how you manage, they assume you're cutting corners. Instead of learning from you, they protect their identity by labeling you as not playing fair. The truth is, unspoken rules survive because most people are afraid to test them. They fear standing out. They fear being judged. They fear being alone. Playing smart requires a certain comfort with isolation. You don't always get applause in real time. Sometimes you get side eyes, silence, and subtle resistance. But that resistance is proof. You've stepped outside the script, and nothing scares a system more than someone who understands the rules well enough to ignore the ones that don't matter. Confidence has a way of attracting attention, even when it's quiet. Not the loud chest thumping kind, but the calm, steady presence that doesn't rush to explain itself. That kind of confidence makes people uneasy because it doesn't ask for permission and it doesn't beg for approval. When someone stands firmly in what they know, without overperforming or apologizing, it creates a vacuum. And into that vacuum pours suspicion. Because when confidence doesn't come with visible struggle, people start looking for hidden motives. Suspicion grows fastest in places where insecurity already lives. When you're confident, you don't overreact to doubt. You don't scramble to defend every decision. You don't chase validation from every corner of the room. That restraint feels unnatural to people who survive on reassurance. They expect anxiety, explanation, hesitation. When they don't get it, They assume something's being concealed. Confidence gets mistaken for secrecy. Composure gets reframed as calculation. The calmer you are, the more people try to read between lines that don't exist. There's also the discomfort of contrast. Confidence highlights uncertainty without saying a word. When you speak with clarity, when you move with intention, it casts a shadow on hesitation around you. People begin comparing themselves before they even realize it, and comparison rarely ends in peace. Instead of asking how to build their own confidence, they question yours. They look for cracks. They replay your actions in their heads, searching for evidence that your certainty is undeserved. Because if your confidence is legitimate, then their doubt becomes a choice rather than a condition. Confidence also removes predictability. Someone who doubts themselves can be guided, nudged, even manipulated. Someone who trusts their judgment is harder to steer. That independence makes people nervous. When they can't influence your reactions, they can't control the narrative around you. So they create one. Whispers replace questions. Assumptions replace conversations. Suspicion becomes a way to regain power in a situation where your confidence already set the tone. Another reason suspicion clings to confidence is that it disrupts the social comfort of shared insecurity. Many environments are built on mutual doubt. People bond over stress, confusion, and fear. When you don't participate in that ritual, you stand apart. Your confidence feels like rejection even when it isn't. They interpret your self-assurance as judgment, as if your calm implies superiority. So they protect themselves by reframing you as untrustworthy. It's easier to mistrust confidence than to confront personal uncertainty. What makes this dynamic almost comical is how quickly people confuse confidence with certainty of outcome. Confidence doesn't mean you can't fail. It means you're not paralyzed by the possibility. But to those who rely on fear as a guide, that looks reckless. They assume you must be hiding something to move forward, without constant reassurance. They can't imagine trusting their own decisions, so they assume you're bluffing when you trust yours. And once suspicion takes root, it feeds on silence. Confident people don't always feel the need to correct every rumor or defend every misinterpretation. That restraint gets twisted into evidence. They say. They didn't deny it. But confidence doesn't waste energy on every shadow. It moves forward while others stand still, debating intentions instead of actions. Suspicion grows because it's loud, restless, and hungry, while confidence stays quiet, grounded, and unwilling to perform fear just to make others feel comfortable. The moment you stand out, the spotlight isn't warm, it's interrogating. People say they admire uniqueness, but what they really admire is variety that stays in its lane. The kind that's interesting but not disruptive. The moment you step outside that invisible boundary, attention shifts from curiosity to surveillance. Every move gets watched a little longer. Every word gets replayed. Because standing out doesn't just make you visible, it makes you measurable, and measurement invites judgment. Blending in is comfortable because it offers protection. When everyone looks the same, responsibility dissolves into the crowd. Mistakes get diluted. Success gets shared. But when you stand out, you carry your outcomes alone. Your wins have your name on them. Your failures too. That clarity makes people uneasy, especially those who've spent years hiding in averages. They don't just see you, they see the risk of being seen themselves. So instead of stepping forward, they pull you apart with observation. Scrutiny isn't always hostile, but it's rarely neutral. It comes from comparison, and comparison is a ruthless sport. Once you stand out, people start measuring themselves against you without your consent. Your pace becomes a reference point. Your decisions become case studies. And when they can't match you, scrutiny turns sharp. They analyze your flaws with enthusiasm. Not because flaws matter, but because flaws level the field. Finding fault becomes a way to shrink you back to size. There's also an unwritten social rule that says standing out should come with justification. You're expected to explain why you're different, why you think that way, why you move that fast, why you're not following the same tired loops. And if your explanation doesn't satisfy everyone, suspicion steps in. Because difference without permission feels like defiance. People prefer uniqueness they can categorize. When they can't label you easily, they examine you more closely, hoping to reduce you to something familiar. Standing out also disrupts narratives. Many people rely on stories they tell themselves about how the world works. Who succeeds? Who fails? What's realistic? When you stand out, you rewrite those stories without asking. And that's uncomfortable. It forces people to update beliefs they've used to stay comfortable. So instead of adjusting their worldview, they scrutinize you, looking for reasons your story shouldn't count. Luck, privilege, timing, anything that keeps their old narrative intact. What makes scrutiny especially intense is that standing out often comes with confidence, even if it's quiet. You don't ask for approval. You don't constantly check the temperature of the room. That independence reads as arrogance to those who depend on consensus to feel safe. So they watch you closely, waiting for a misstep that proves you were never special, just reckless. Scrutiny becomes a form of patience, a long game built on the hope that you'll slip. And here's the irony. The same people who scrutinize you for standing out would never trade places with you. Because standing out requires exposure. It means being seen without camouflage. It means accepting that not everyone will understand or approve. Scrutiny is the price of visibility. Not because you asked for attention, but because attention follows contrast. And once you become the contrast, the crowd can't look away, even as it pretends to question why you ever stood out in the first place. Intelligence is easy to admire from a distance, but owning it up close takes nerve. The moment you stop downplaying what you know, the moment you stop pretending you're unsure just to make others comfortable, you step into dangerous territory. Because humility, as the world often defines it, isn't about self-awareness. It's about self-reduction. You're expected to shrink your sharp edges, soften your insights, and act surprised by things you clearly understand. The courage isn't in being smart, it's in refusing to hide it. Owning intelligence means standing by your thoughts, even when they make the room quiet, even when people exchange looks, even when your clarity disrupts their confusion. Most people aren't threatened by ignorance. They're threatened by precision. When you speak clearly, when you see through nonsense, when you connect dots others didn't notice, you remove the fog they've been using as cover. And fog is comfortable. Fog allows excuses to survive. Clear thinking burns it away. And not everyone wants to see what's left. There's pressure to play dumb in subtle ways, laughing off insights, saying, "I might be wrong," when you're not. Asking questions you already know the answers to, just to appear agreeable. That performance keeps the peace. But owning intelligence means opting out of that act. It means trusting your mind enough to let it be seen, and visibility is risky. Once people know you're capable, they expect things from you. They test you. They challenge you. Some try to provoke mistakes just to prove you're not as sharp as you seem. What makes this courage rare is that intelligence doesn't come with universal approval. Strength can be admired. Charisma can be forgiven. But intelligence changes dynamics. It shifts who leads conversations, who influences decisions, who sees the cracks in the structure. When you own your intelligence, you quietly change the balance of power. And power shifts make people uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from you staying quiet. There's also loneliness in it. When you stop pretending not to understand, you stop fitting neatly into certain circles. Small talk feels smaller. Repetition feels louder. You start noticing how often people talk to avoid thinking. Owning intelligence means resisting the urge to dull yourself just to belong, and that resistance can isolate you. It's easier to blend in by acting less aware. It's harder to stand apart and accept the distance that comes with it. People often mistake owning intelligence for arrogance because they confuse confidence with superiority. But there's nothing arrogant about trusting your own reasoning. Arrogance needs applause. Intelligence doesn't. It operates quietly, choosing when to speak and when silence says more. But that restraint doesn't always protect you. In fact, it can make things worse. When you don't over-explain, people assume secrecy. When you don't argue loudly, they assume calculation. Owning intelligence means accepting that misinterpretation is part of the deal. And yet, not owning it comes at a higher cost. Dimming yourself teaches others how to treat you. It invites being overlooked, underestimated, managed. When you consistently hide what you're capable of, you start believing the act. Courage is refusing that erosion. It's choosing to respect your own mind, even when others don't know what to do with it. It's answering honestly instead of safely. It's trusting your insight, even when it makes people uncomfortable. Because intelligence that's owned doesn't just think. It decides, acts, and reshapes the room without asking permission. And that quiet resolve is exactly why it takes courage in a world that prefers everyone thinking just enough to get by, but never enough to change the game.